Hello and welcome to another episode of The Unstarving Musician. I am Robonzo. How are you? Where are you? What are you wearing? Are you holding it together in this crazy time of war? I hope so. If you're a first-time listener, I sometimes talk a little bit about myself and things I'm thinking about in this portion of the intro. You might be thinking, who is this guy and why does he think I care about what he's doing or thinking about? Well, you know who I am now, and if you don't care, skip ahead a couple of minutes or just sit tight, make yourself a sandwich and relax. I'm learning a handful of new songs for a couple of upcoming shows, including one of my own songs, New Gods Part 2. I've never performed New Gods, and it'll be an adventure. I'm also doing a number of great B-side covers from my self-indulgent memory archives. My MO for this band I call Robonzo. If you find yourself in Querétaro, Mexico, in late May, come see one of the shows. You can find dates and ticket info at robonzo.com. I'd love to see you there. Before we move on to my guest for today's show, the best way to support my work here is to sign up for my bi-weekly newsletter liner notes. Whether you're a musician trying to book better gigs, a writer navigating publishing, or any creative professional building an independent career, you're facing the same core challenges. How do you balance artistry with business? How do you find your audience? How do you create sustainable incomes? I started researching these questions to help musicians get better paying gigs, but what I discovered through hundreds of conversations with working artists, industry pros, and creative professionals, it opened my eyes to strategies that work across all creative disciplines. Liner Notes delivers this research and proven strategies from creators who are solving these problems. Subscribe to get actionable insights on marketing that doesn't feel gross, building genuine fan relationships, managing the business side without losing your creative spark, and turning your passion into sustainable income. It's free and you can unsubscribe at any time. If you've been thinking about sync licensing as a way to generate income from your music, there's a good chance you're focused on the wrong problem. Most independent songwriters assume the barrier is technical. The mix isn't clean enough, the metadata isn't right, the instrumental version isn't ready. And those things matter, but my guest today will tell you that's not what's keeping your music out of film and television. The barrier is simpler and harder at the same time. Nobody knows who you are. Chris SD is the founder of Sync Songwriter, and what sets him apart from most people teaching sync licensing is that he's built genuine relationships with music supervisors over years of networking, conferences, phone calls, and yes, at least one beach picnic. Those relationships are now the foundation of what he offers his students, not just training, but direct introductions to the gatekeepers. 2 of those students had 5 songs placed in Anora, the film that won multiple Oscars earlier this year. And his take on how that happened cut straight to the point. They had relationships with the supervisor, and their music fit what the project needed. Today, we're talking about what sync ready actually means, why libraries and agencies are essentially a lottery, why authenticity beats writing for sync every time, and what AI is and isn't doing to the licensing landscape. At the close of our conversation, Chris said some really nice things about the podcast, which you will hear. I felt a little funny about leaving those comments in, but taking it out would have required some time-consuming editing. I didn't have the energy for that, so I decided screw it. I'll leave it in. Thanks again for those kind words, Chris. And now here is my conversation with Chris SD of Sync Songwriter.
Sync licensing was an interesting journey because I started, of course, being a producer in a studio, right? And I was working with a lot of different artists. I was working with major label artists and as well as independent artists. And the indie artists often would have the just as good music, right, as some of the major label artists, but they didn't have the backing of agents or labels or anything propelling their careers along. And it was always like a real sort of, crapshoot, what was going to happen with the record, right? Which was usually nothing because they just didn't, they were putting posters on poles or getting on social or whatever to get the record out and things, we'd work hard on the record. So I was getting frustrated and thinking like, how can I, find a way to get more attention for these records. And a little bit was selfish because I was working really hard, giving them a big break on the price and everything, and trying to, make things happen for them. So I was like, I want something to happen with these records. So it was right around that time that licensing started to become a thing for indie artists. Before that, it was like selling out. No one wanted to do it. And so it was right around that time where I started hearing, I got a sync placement, and I got all this like notoriety, and I got signed by a manager, because they noticed me, or, I paid my rent for a year, just off of one sync placement. So I was like, what is this thing, So started looking into it, and sort of just kind of got into it that way. I started realizing the power of it and meeting music supervisors, who are actually the people who get music into TV and film, and gradually started building that network over time, started introducing more musicians to them whose music I thought would be a great fit, and then started Sync Songwriter to basically do this on a bigger scale for everybody else that I wasn't working with in the studio. So I can't work with everybody, obviously. There's millions of musicians, millions of records out there. But that's sort of how I got started.
I was thinking before our call, for some reason, I was kind of trying to think about the beginnings of sync, the popularity of it, and an artist that sticks out in my head, and I'm sure we were in California at the time, was Moby, and he seemed like he gained a lot of notoriety through sync. I don't know if that's actually true, but that was my memory anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he absolutely did. And in fact, he is the kind of the OG, honestly. He was one of the first ones who broke that barrier for indie music. And he must have made millions of dollars from placements. I mean, there was like, he had that one record, Play, right? Mm-hmm. Which got synced over and over and over and over. It's like, because you don't just get one song synced. You get like multiple songs that can be, you can get the same songs synced in multiple things. So it was really incredible. Yeah.
And, I don't know if this is actually part of sync or a different thing, like licensing, but I know that his music, because my wife worked at such a company in Silicon Valley, was like played at some big corporate startup.com, era, corporate meetings. But I would imagine it was kind of an extension of what he was doing, whether it was actually part of sync or not. But he was everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that side of it, but that's pretty interesting.
What are you listening to lately that has absolutely nothing to do with sync?
You want to know?
Yeah, sure.
Bob Marley on vinyl.
Oh, nice.
We just got the record because I had, it was a revelation to me. I know it sounds crazy because I've been in music all my life and everything, and I've owned turntables and everything, and I appreciate vinyl for what it is, and and I like digital music too, and it's better at certain things than vinyl, and vinyl's better than digital. But I couldn't get over how much better, at least to me, that the records, certain records sound on vinyl, because they were recorded, I guess, for that medium or mastered for it and everything like that or something. But it just sounds so much more three-dimensional and everything. So I was sort of just listening. It was just yesterday, day before, and I was just like, wow, this is just absolutely amazing. So I'm all over the place with my music. Being out here, I like listening to the local radio station. So I'm into like a lot of like Americana and Appalachian music.
I was about to say, are you getting some Appalachian hillbilly music?
Yeah. Heck yeah, man. There's some great songs, that were written up here. And, of course you can't avoid Dolly Parton, right? She's the one around here. She's written so many songs, everybody knows her for her big radio hits, but she's just got this huge catalog. So yeah, I'm sort of all over the place. I'll throw on the Beatles, and then I'll listen to something super current, whatever's going on, Paper Kites or whatever. And yeah, so I'm all over the map there.
Nice. I bet you that, speaking of the Bob Marley album and how some things just don't seem to translate to digital, that because I heard an interview of a guy who does remastering like to the finest detail, and I just wonder, because I always notice that I've always thought to myself, those Bob Marley songs don't sound great, and I've only ever heard them on digital, I think. Well, I'm sure. Well, when I was a kid, I probably heard it in the background and didn't pay attention. Heard it on vinyl, or maybe tape, but I just never thought they sounded very good as a recording. But I suspect that there's a specific, bit of mastering that happens to make that transfer, and for whatever reason, I don't know. Maybe the right people haven't got a hold of it. But you were very curious. I don't currently have a turntable. I've certainly owned them. But when we left the U.S., we sort of burned the boats, and so I've been thinking about buying another one, but I'll have to put that on my list to check out.
Yeah. And there's to qualify this, right? To qualify what sounds good in how I'm saying it, is one of my favorite records is PJ Harvey's 4-tracks, and that's literally her on a 4-track, right? So if you're looking for hi-fi, that is not it. But there's this rawness and innocence and authenticity to it, which is absolutely insurmountable when it comes to trying to, well, then they produce the record from those demos. In my opinion, the demos are better. So when I'm talking about listening to Bob Marley on vinyl, I'm not saying, well, now I can hear like how the guitars were, recorded, or that the recording or the production is quite exceptional or something. I'm not talking about those terms at all, the way I might listen to an Adele record or something. What I mean is that the song and the actual track communicates. It's more compelling. It's more evocative with vinyl, right? In the feeling of it, and you just feel the songwriting more. And so I wouldn't say that Bob Marley records are the pinnacle of, music production. Somebody might use as a reference in an audiophile system to make certain determinations. But at the same time, due to their aesthetic and of what they are, they're actually fantastic. I mean, I can't imagine the Redemption song being recorded any other way. And that's just a very basic recording, it's not even that high quality if you wanted to qualify it that way, but it is so compelling the way it's recorded.
Yeah, part of the experience.
Yeah.
So what's your, getting into sync here, what and sync ready music, what's your checklist for determining whether a song is sync ready, and what are the most common kind of deal breakers you see or have seen?
Yeah, great question. So first I want to qualify something is I'm not someone who picks music for TV and film. So I don't pick it and I don't pitch it. I'm not the one who shops it. Now in Sync Songwriter, we absolutely participate in, getting music from our students / members to supervisors directly. But my main thing is literally introducing songwriters to music supervisors, because it's an impossible task. It's like an impossible thing. Typically, usually they have to be, a musician's got to be in like a library, music library, or an agency. And those are generally, they're easy to get into, and they're great for the industry because they can go there and find a song pretty easily. But they are nowadays terrible, in my opinion, for indie songwriters, because everybody and their dog has a record out, and everyone's trying to get into, trying to get streams of Spotify or into TV and film and all that. So you've got these libraries that have some of the millions of tracks, right? And at least hundreds, almost all of them now have like thousands to hundreds of thousands of tracks. So you're floating in this ocean of music, and it's like playing a lottery, right? So you're just in there, just needle in a haystack, hoping to be discovered, which inevitably, of course, almost never, ever happens. So the key is having relationships with the people who actually place the music. And so my job is not so much to pick the music and everything, and I'll certainly talk about what works and what doesn't, but just to kind of qualify, like what I do is I introduce songwriters directly to music supervisors. I'm like a matchmaker, so that they can form those relationships and make things happen based on their own relationship with them.
Okay.
I find that much more powerful. But I also, of course, teach the songwriters before I introduce them about what works and what doesn't. So to answer your question is, things, the most important thing to know is every song has a home. Now, a lot of people don't think that. they think you got to write for sync licensing, meaning you listen to a movie or watch a movie or whatever, or you're into a show and you're like, okay, I got to write something that's going to fit that show. And there are people who do that. Some people do it very well. It's in the vast minority because it's hard to compete against people in genres that you don't do all the time, right? You're better sticking to your genius zone, doing what you do, and write for your fans, write from your heart, and do it the way you would do it, and then find a home for that track, not the other way around. You don't want to just be chasing opportunities. You want to do what you do as an artist, and then, because there's so many opportunities out there, it's crazy. It's like, almost $1 billion industry. So you can just easily find opportunities in movies and shows and ads and streaming, and like there's, YouTube videos and wedding videos even, or whatever. So there's all of these opportunities out there. So the things that work, once you understand that there's a home for every song, you just need to find the right spot for it, are some of the pitfalls are things like simple things. There's basic things like in production, for example, like if your vocal is mixed like a radio mix, you have to remember that don't want to be competing with the dialogue on the screen, right? You want to be able to support what is happening. That's your job. Is your music is to support it. So you want to make sure that your music is not dominating, especially the vocal being too loud. So typically a sync mix will have the vocal down a little bit. Now, I'm not talking about burying it or, doing anything weird. It's simply not doing a radio mix, right? So that's like just one example. Another one is build. Supervisors love when songs have change and build and dynamics. So you're taking the listener on a journey. So it's not like you cut and pasted your chorus, boom, 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 one after the other. Mm-hmm. You've got some sort of motion and movement within a kind of a sonic story arc in your song. That's really like a important thing. People worry about things they shouldn't worry about. Like, what levels should this song be at? What my master be at? Does it matter if I have a fade out? What if my intro is too long? None of those things matter, because they're going to go in there and they're going to chop them up. They prefer hard endings on songs because they're easier to segue into something else. But another thing is have an instrumental only. Like, in fact, more songs get placed that are instrumental versions of your actual track. And they also like to cut between them. So give you an example. I produced a song at my online studio for, one of our members. He's a very accomplished producer himself. He did his version. It got into Grey's Anatomy, and they took half of the one I did and half of the one he did. So they like to cut between different versions sometimes. And having an instrumental is great, because they can have the instrumental coming in while the dialogue's going on. And then when the dialogue stops and one character says walking off into the sunset, your lyrics they can kick right in there, Mm-hmm. And sometimes they'll just use your lyrics only. We had a member who just got into the last Tribeca festival in a big movie, saw his own sync that was like really big for like, I don't know, at least a minute and a half, 2 minutes or something, which is a long time in film. Right there in the theater, thought that was awesome. We had tracks that got into Anora, which is the biggest film of 2025, won 5 Oscars. We had somebody got into Pain Hustlers. It was like, that was a 2-minute. They said it was like a music video for their song, and they got called by like festivals and got written up in Billboard magazine, and their streams went crazy on Spotify. So having those different versions that they can cut between is always great. And there's a bunch more. If we had 2 hours in this podcast, we might be able to dig in deeper, but
that's very informative though.
Oh, cool. Good.
Yeah. That's good stuff. So I assume that sync readiness is primarily like a production thing, as you described, not a composition thing. But between those two areas, and tell me if I'm wrong about it, but do artists tend to fall short on one more so than the other? Speaking of production versus composition. Sounds like production.
That's a great question. Yeah, I would say production is the most avoidable issue,
easiest
right?
to control, yeah.
Yeah, so if you looked at the song, I'm vamping on this one. If you look at the song like Lifestyle, and you look at going to the doctor and checkups, prevention as the production, you can, you could easily go to the doctor and get your checkups and catch things. Could be anything. Maybe it's a funny mole on your skin, and there's no big deal. Like 200 years ago, it would have killed you, right? But nowadays you walk in, they're like, oh, we should look at this mole and let's take it out just to be on the safe side, right? No big deal. And so production's a lot like that. Production's, I mean, sure, it's not easy to become a pro producer. It takes years to learn how to do it properly. But the production's the easiest thing to fix. It's the easiest hurdle to overcome. It's the easiest thing you can ask someone and say, why don't you like this track? What's wrong with the track? And the simplest solution is do something in the studio. You can just redo it or hire someone who can. The songwriting, on the other hand, is there's some talent involved, and there's some intelligence and know-how, and experience. So all those things got to come together in the songwriting to write, truly great songs. Now, thankfully in sync licensing, the bar in production is not like it is maybe on like hit radio. You can get stuff that sounds good into TV and film. It doesn't have to sound great. The songs don't have to be epic, like make it or break it. It's either a hit song or no, it's not, and you're going to starve this year again, So you can do TV and films more forgiving by a long shot with that, but you still have to hit the bar in both of them. But I would say the songwriting, of course, is the most crucial, and then the production, it's like a Rubik's Cube. You can just solve it.
I have a good friend who is a prolific songwriter, and he decided I don't know, in the last couple of years or more, that he wanted to get into sync, and the first feedback he got is like, dude, your songs are great, but your production's lacking. So yeah, and he's such a DIY person too. I don't know, like you just said, something almost magical to people who think that the only way is to do it themselves, but is hire somebody, find someone who can do that job.
Yeah, because there's a couple of reasons for that. The biggest one is you don't want to waste great songs on mediocre production. Nobody's born a great producer. Just because you have a computer and an interface and some mics and you like watch some YouTube videos doesn't make you a genius mix engineer, And you don't have to be a genius, but you've got to reach a point where you can do it effectively. And so in the meantime, hire somebody within your budget. And then while they're also creating better work than you could do, and you're getting sync placements with your tracks now, you can learn from them, especially if they're like using the same DAW as you. If you're both using Pro Tools or both using a Logic or whatever, tell them to send you the sessions, and then go through the plugins. If you don't have them all, go get them and just pop them in there and then see what they're doing to your music. Because if they EQ your voice or do something to your particular voice in a particular way, that's going to work on other songs on your particular voice. So you can learn so much while you're learning. Don't waste your great songs on your kind of hobby or attempting to produce. So, I mean, I listened back to some old recordings I did, and there's a few I'm pleasantly surprised. I was like, oh, I was better than I thought. But most of them, I'm cringing. So,
yeah, the evolution of one's talent.
Yeah.
Do you? I think you touched on this too, but and maybe the answer is no. But do you or have you ever coached artists to adapt an existing catalog versus writing intentionally for sync?
Well, yeah. So exactly the main thing that I deal with at Sync Songwriter are independent songwriters, which means not people who are writing for sync licensing. So that is, I don't really deal with, honestly, almost any of them. There's a few that I work with, but not many. Most people are just songwriters. And the beautiful thing about that is that, like I said earlier, you're writing from your heart, and you're doing what you would already do for your fans. And the reason that that's so good, and why I encourage that, is because that's what music supervisors ultimately are looking for. They're looking for authenticity. They want something real. They don't want it to sound like it was, like you were trying to be something. It's a little like sending a postcard, instead of going to the place, right? Mm-hmm. That authenticity comes from you being real with, and you're good at what you love to do. So you're, and the thing that you do over and over. So you're going to be much better at certain things. And like, well, it's like, I would never try to write a hip hop track, you know? I like, especially 90s. I'm really into the boom bap hip hop stuff. And I had an MPC 3000 for a while, and I like programming beats when I've got time, but I'm not, I can't compete because I don't do it all the time. I could have been great, and I could, if I dedicated, a few years to it, I could be a great hip hop producer, but I'm not. So I don't try to compete on that level, even though I like it and have fun messing around with it. So my advice to songwriters is just do what you love to do. Like, just keep writing what you write, and then find the opportunities for your songs. Don't chase opportunities, and go that way. So I think that's the most important, aspect of that thing. So in terms of like getting music and saying, well, I've got these tracks and I want to get them into TV and film, the biggest challenge, like if there's one thing I can leave your listeners with today, the biggest challenge isn't the production, even the songwriting, or learning all the technical things like how metadata works, or, the deal points and how the contracts work and your copyright and all that. The biggest challenge that you have by far, like by a long shot, is how do you get heard by the right people? How do you actually connect with the right people? That's the biggest challenge of all. Because if you don't do that, you're either in a library or you're in a sync agency. And then you're just a needle in a haystack. You're just sitting there playing the lottery. And the only real way to get consistent placements is having relationships. It's a relationships business. And that doesn't have to be a dirty word. It's not nepotism. It's not schmoozing. It's just supervisors being like, man, I want to put money in your pocket because you're an indie songwriter. I'd much rather give it to you than a publishing company or a big label. And you make my job easy because you've got great music. You give me what I want when I need it. And if I know I need something, I'm going to go back to you first. That's where the magic happens.
Do you find that some of your indie songwriter students and prospective students or people that meet you, did they find any of this a big surprise?
Yeah, because I think a lot of musicians, and including myself, back in the day, I was in a band too, we all wear these rose-colored glasses, because we, not all of us, but a lot of us. And the reason that happens, I think, is because the songs are so important to us. We write these songs about things we care about, people we care about, or causes, or whatever your motivation is to write. And when we do that, we bring out a part of us that doesn't normally get out, right? But it gets out into a song. It gets out into a song, and there's a vulnerability there. And it creates a bond with you and your song. It's like almost like having a child in a way. And those songs kind of get a life of their own. They sort of like go off and do these things and become these things almost apart from you, at some point. And we view them with such deference and importance that when it comes time to imagining that, wow, the right people just have to hear my music and everything's going to work out. Like, it's going to be like, going to be great. Now, I just said that connection is the most important part. Getting those people to hear your music is the most important part. It still doesn't mean, though, that what you did was genius or like it's going to work for them. They might not even be looking for what you're looking for. So you've got to, of course, send them what they're looking for when they're looking for it. There's a bunch of different things you need to do in that. But ultimately, it comes down to keep writing, keep creating more songs, be pragmatic about what you're doing. And you should wear the rose-colored glasses, but you should know when to take them off too. I guess that's the advice, right? You should be in love with what you do, but you got to know that there's a lot of talented people out there, right? Thousands and thousands and millions who are all trying to do what you're doing. So it's like, well, how do I do this the right way? And there's a few very basic steps that you got to do, which this is what I do in Sync Songwriter. And if you can do those in the right order, you can absolutely get sync placements.
Yeah, that's some of what you said is a recurring theme in my conversations, and I'm just thinking of one from an artist who's done a lot in sync and performs and has worked with some noteworthy names, but he just said in a funny way something to me once, and as he was saying it, I'm like, yeah, I've seen that in my lifetime. But he said, people think the music business is a talent contest often. He goes, it's really not.
Yeah, it's true.
And he went on to talk about relationships, and
yeah,
I mean, obviously you want to put out good music and all that, but relationships are so big.
They are so big, and here's why. It's because there's a human on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason, right? And a lot of people, like music supervisors, they get music for big Hollywood blockbusters and movies and shows and and ads and all kinds of different things. And people have this vision of like, wow, they must go to work in these suits and ties, and they work in these big offices and like a Hollywood studio, and these are the people I'm dealing with. It's like, no, they're actually musician types that you'd want to hang out with. Like I know a ton of them, and I have many who are good friends of mine, and they're a great hang. They're just like you and I. They love music. They got the job because they love music. They support indie musicians. They love, discovering brand new music that no one else has heard before. And they're super, super easy to deal with. But there are these people, there's humans, right? So when they wake up in the morning till they go to bed, they've got a certain bandwidth. And just like you and I and everybody probably listening, you feel kind of overwhelmed at some point, with all the, all the emails and all the things that are going on, right?
Right.
Life is kind of complicated, and it's just like, no matter if you're hanging out, living on a beach in Mexico or wherever you happen to be, and there's always complications. There's always things that you got to contend with, and they're the same way. So if you can make their job easier and they get to know you, and they're like, you're the easy button. I can just call you up because I'm comfortable with you. You're cool. You've got great music. I know I can always get to you. You're easy to work with. You don't fight on the fees. You don't, you're instantly there when I need something, or within 24 hours. That's who they're going to go to. And that's why the relationships are important. And then there's, of course, a million other people waiting behind the gate. And they're like, why not me? It's like, well, you're just not the one in front of them that they've developed a relationship with, because they're human, and that's it.
Yep, that's huge. So what's the timing strategy, speaking of relationships? Like how do you know, or how do you coach, like when someone wants to know how often to follow up on an opportunity, how do they do so without burning a relationship with one of these supervisors in terms of timing?
Yeah. So, that's another great question. So it really comes down to, if you're following up with supervisors because you're not getting any response back from them, and maybe you didn't have one in the first place, they didn't have any sort of connection with them in the first place, you don't have a relationship, right? So everybody's emailing them. Like they get hundreds of emails a day, some of the people that I work with. So they can't possibly listen to everything that's sent to them. And especially if it's not solicited in some way or from someone they know, it pretty much goes to their spam folder, because they're busy, right? They're busy working on getting music from their go-to people, the relationship people that they've got. So if you're trying to cold email or cold reach out to supervisors, you might get lucky. I mean, I've heard it happen before, but it's like the story of the person who crashed their car and it exploded, but the person survived because they weren't wearing their seatbelt and got ejected through the sunroof that happened to be open, landed in a pine tree and fell into a snowbank. And they're like, I'm never wearing my seatbelt again. Right? It's like, dude, you were just lucky, So it's a lot like that. So it's about the relationships. But once you have relationships with supervisors, you've already had a connection with them, then you're generally not having to follow up too much, except to jog their memory or to kind of like follow up because they're just busy, just like you and I need prompting, I'm sure, from people sometimes, or at least our automated apps have to remind us, this thing's coming up or whatever. But it's really about the relationship. And it's not like a friend. It doesn't have to be about friends. You don't have to be talking about each other's cats or anything like that. It's the relationship I'm talking about is about the music, right? They admire you first. The personal relationship can come later. We have lots of them who develop relationships. They text each other things like that. But I'm talking about just being able to be heard. That's the key. That's the step you need to take, essentially.
Yeah, great advice. You have this step where you make direct introductions to music supervisors. How did you build those relationships for yourself, and how does that translate to your students?
Yeah, so that was a long, arduous path. So when I first started out, and as I was saying, in the studio working with independent songwriters, I was thinking like, this sounds great. So what I need to do is I just need to go talk to some supervisors. And I was a little bit smug, I have to admit. I thought, well, I've had success in the music industry, got some awards under my belt. This should be easy, right? Should be able to like call some up, say, hey, how you doing? Whatever. They're totally two different industries and might be interesting to them, but I'm irrelevant to them, right? I'm just this music producer guy who's doesn't even, I was totally approaching it the wrong way. So I eventually got my foot in the door by talking to some supervisors. And honestly, I would hang out with everybody I could. I went to everything I was invited to. I would go to conferences. I even bribed one supervisor with a beach picnic in LA to tell me to come and hang out with me and tell me the whole back end of how it all works. I was like, I really want to know like what happens and how does it all function, like behind the scenes, not what you can read about. And she was like, that I'd be happy to, whatever. So we hung out on the beach and I took copious notes. And so just a bunch of things. It took me years to build those relationships up. And a lot of it's based on trust. So I got to the point where they're like, oh, Chris, yeah, he knows some great independent musicians. And Chris is, above board. He's a straight shooter and he can introduce people who have great music to me. And I really like it. And I feel safe within Chris's little ecosystem of Sync Songwriter. And that's really what the magic is. So it's this thing that you have to remember that supervisors don't really trust independent musicians and songwriters because they've been burned so many times before in different levels. I'll give you one example. You can imagine that you write a song with your band, and then you get it to the supervisor somehow, and the supervisor listens to it, and they're like, this is great. Now I got to clear it. Do you own the copyright? And you're like, yeah, I got the copyright. And okay, awesome. So it gets into the movie, right? The movie's about to come out in a month or whatever, the big release. And let's pick on, who should we pick on today? The cowbell player. Yeah, the cowbell player in your band is saying, hey, man, I was in the room when you wrote that, and my cowbell part is kind of a hook. I'm in for 10% on that for the writing for sure. You're like, what are you talking about? It's like, no, you can't use the song until we settle this. Well, that's a complete, absolute nightmare, career-ending moment for a supervisor. So they stay away from that stuff, right? What if you have a hidden sample in there that they missed, right? So there's all these aspects that are there. So in Sync Songwriter, when I work with songwriters, they have to learn how things work. Now, they don't have to learn a bunch of stuff. They have to learn the foundation and the essential things so that I feel safe introducing them to the supervisors, and the supervisors feel safe because they know they came through me and got that training to understand, like, okay, they know what they're doing. They got their ducks in a row. They got their paperwork all done. And that's how we get a big advantage with that.
Of those couple of students who got songs in Anora, what did those two do differently in their preparation and pitching?
Yeah, they didn't do anything different in terms of within. Let's talk about this first, internal and external. Maybe that'll fully answer your question. Internally to Sync Songwriter, right? I don't just work with two people. I work with a number of songwriters. Mm-hmm. So the question could be asked, like, why those two and why not other Sync Songwriter?
That's my question.
Right? Oh, okay.
Just kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh, okay. And so that is the internal question. Well, for one, those two, songwriters had relationships with that particular supervisor, but so did others, of course. But the key was the supervisor was looking for particular kinds of music. And guess what got in there, right? When people say, oh, you got to write like some pop or hip hop or country or rock and roll, the big four, to get into TV and film. It's like, no, Anora, 5 Oscar winning film. Those 2 placements, well, they got 5 tracks total between the 2 of them, jazz and Russian hip hop. So talk about esoteric, you know? So that's what I mean. Every song's got a home. But there's not a lot of people that have Russian hip hop tracks in their back pocket. And there's not a lot of people who do jazz in that way that they were looking for. So that's what I meant earlier about you've got to give them what they want when they're looking for it. There's so many examples of, indie songwriters I've connected with supervisors, and they love the music. They're like, man, you are so talented. You're so good, but I can't use it. Because they're working on like multiple projects at the same time. But out of all the projects they're working, they're like, I literally can't use this genre of music that you're doing, because I'm not working there. So I'm of no help to you. Right. So that's another thing about targeting. You want to find the opportunities for your songs and not just the supervisor who likes your music.
Doesn't sorry to interrupt, but does an indie artist have the information available to them in the ideal cases to know that, hey, my music might fit there? Or is it really, because for a moment there it was just sounding like, man, a lot of things have to align for a placement.
Yeah, so you can find out about those things. So that we're talking about 2 barriers here, right? One is having the right music for the right opportunities. So no matter, you could go to, like, let's use Grey's Anatomy again, because everybody knows it. It's such a big sync thing, right? Is you could be writing amazing music, but Grey's Anatomy literally never places your kind of music. They just don't use it. They just never really put those genres in Grey's Anatomy, right? Or say it's to Hallmark, right? Hallmark is all about family and holidays and things like that. And you're a punk rocker. I mean, there might be some random scene where there's a scene where somebody walking by a punk rock bar where you're like, there's music emanating from it. But generally, they're not going to be using your music, right? So that's barrier number 1. And barrier number 2 is even being able to connect with the supervisor, which leads me to the external answer to your question. What made the Anora songwriters different than everybody else in the world trying to get their music into TV and film? And that was literally strictly connections, right? After the music being relevant, it was not being heard. Like, that supervisor just doesn't talk to like the millions of musicians out there, right? Just they'll never hear their music. And the sad thing, especially now, is because everybody can put records out, the vast majority of them, like, and I'm making this up because I don't know, but I think this is an accurate estimate. I believe 99, it's probably got to be 99%. It's probably more than 99%, 99 point something, that will never see the light of day, that will never have any notoriety, that will never get heard beyond the friends and family of the artist, or a few people on social. I mean, if you go to like SoundCloud and Spotify, there's 100,000 songs a day that get uploaded to Spotify.
There's too much, Chris. I can't take it.
Oh no, I was, when I first heard that figure, I thought it was like per month. I thought that was nuts, and that was like week, yeah. And I thought it was a week. No, it's daily. 100,000. Actually, I think I say 100,000, but I think it's 120. But I always say 100,000 to be conservative. So does that mean that there's no chance for you? Well, if we were all playing a lottery, there would be no chance. But here's the way to look at it. So people say, well, then why would I even get into this, Chris? If that's what you're saying is true, then there's no chance for me, right? I mean, I'm a needle in a haystack, blah, blah, blah. The way to look at it is to ask yourself, if Elon Musk or whoever said, guys, we got this spaceship that's going to go to Mars tomorrow, and we're looking for some people to go to Mars. We pretended they tested it and it's perfectly safe and everything, and you could have a chance to go, and you really wanted to go. What are your odds of being selected, right? So, well, we're going to subtract, of course, anybody probably under 18 at minimum, and then we're going to take out the really old people, right? And we're going to take out just certain people just can't get on a spaceship. And then we end up with this huge amount of people, right? Billions of them in the world. And so you'd be like, well, I'm one out of so many billion. Okay, yeah, that's true for like a farmer in Nebraska or you. It's probably one in, say even half, 4 billion or something, right? A chance. But what is it for someone who went to space cadets or like got trained by NASA? Like, what are your odds then? Or you've got a degree in like Martian soil, you know, what are your
Or
odds now?
or someone in the C-suites at SpaceX.
Or yeah, right. Or thank you. Yes, we can bring that in there. That direct kind of relationship, of course. So what are your odds? They're like astronomically better, right? And that's the same thing as sync licensing. You're not playing a lottery if you've got the relationships. So you actually filled in the blank best for me on that one. So, about the relationship. But anyway, that's kind of where that is.
That's good stuff. I believe you cite like a 6 to 12 month window for first placements. Is that right?
Nope. Where'd you hear that?
Well, okay, this is the way I inferred this from my notes, and forgive me, fact check me, that you would assume a 6 to 12 month window for first placement for your students, like when they're ready.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So the reason for that is, well, to talk. Okay, so placements, there's no way to know when they're going to happen, right? So there's no guarantees someone's going to get a placement. No one can guarantee it. Not even the supervisor can guarantee it because the directors and the producers have the final say. So there's that. All right. So then, secondly, a placement can happen right away. They might hear it and be like, this is perfect for what I'm working on because it's already top of mind, right? They're already thinking, boom. So we get placements like that happen immediately. Some of them can be, a week, two later. Some of them can be a few months later. Some of them can be years later, out of the blue, 3 years later. It's like, hey, I had your song in my little collection. I always remembered it. And it was kind of not something I normally work on. I got hired to work on this thing. I went back and I did it. And boom, right? The number I think that you have is based on my program. So I have a program called The Art of the Song Pitch. So we have to, as I said earlier, I have to kind of train the indie songwriters first before I introduce them. And it's a 6-month program, and they do that within the program. So it's really should be, it's really 3 months we start pitching music after they start. But there is a beginning part where I don't introduce them before they're ready. So you got the right idea, just the wrong time frame.
Got it. So are there, if we're looking at the correct time frame, are there variables that move someone along that a little faster once they've completed that program?
Yeah. So the one thing that moves people quicker is the amount of relationships that they have and how they really sort of are involved in the process.
Mm-hmm.
So some people, will just be like, hey, I know 2 supervisors, and they just keep hitting those 2 up. Other people are really proactive, right? Mm-hmm. And because I can introduce them to a lot. And they'll have tens of, the 50 music supervisors. And if they're always following up with them and they're prolific, they're writing music and producing it, they're just by the sheer numbers are going to probably end up with more sync placements. Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking of this as we first started talking, and relationships came in early in our conversation, but I would imagine that you sometimes meet people that you're having a little bit of a tougher time imagining them being able to break some of the barriers that they might need to, like maybe their network's okay, but you might be concerned for them just because of the personality part that you see. I don't know if that's true or not, but I would just kind of imagine that. Do you kind of do you coach people on that side of things?
We don't really, well, yes and no on the personality. There's something more important that I'll talk about in a second. But in terms of their sort of how they come across, or, well, let's just call it that. Let's say it's how somebody is, their demeanor, and how they approach things, right? I certainly tell people what's important on that level with music supervisors. And it's contrary to what a lot of people think it is. You want to be viewed as a peer. You don't want to be overly deferential to them. Like, please, do me a favor. I know you really want to get a placement, but you never want to come across as, desperate or anything. And you certainly don't want to be condescending on the opposite pole, right? So In terms of that, of course, I can do some light training. I call it light because you can't change people
Right.
easily. Personalities don't really change that much. Smart people can recognize that they might have a deficiency in something and say, you know what? And I'm not talking just about this, talking about I think it's good for all of us to sort of recognize what our weaknesses are. And as I was saying before, if you can't produce records well enough, don't beat yourself up. Hire somebody and just get better. Take revenge later. Right? You'll get good. You just take your time. In the meantime, recognize that you're not that great at it. And so I think it's important. The Clint Eastwood line, right? A man's got to know his limits or something from a Dirty Harry movie.
Right.
So it just popped into my head. So I think that it's important for people to sort of understand what those things are, but you can't change those things. But we're absolutely careful about that. If we have some people we don't think are a good fit, we don't sort of work with them, essentially. If we think they're going to be a problem for the music supervisors, we're a bit of a gatekeeper that way.
Sure.
But thankfully, it's like very, very far and few between. I mean, there's all kinds of people in this world, and sometimes blunt might be considered aggressive when it's not. It's just people are, different culture, different personality, whatever. So that's not what I'm talking about. It's like the one that kind of everybody can say, oh yeah, this is, not a very nice person, or, they're whatever, they're creating problems or something. More important than that, of course, is the music, making sure the music comes across in the right way. And so that's a big part of it, right? There's a production module, and I talk about the do's and don'ts of songwriting. It's not teaching people how to songwrite, but it's like the pitfalls, things to avoid, the things that don't work, things like that, how to target your music correctly. Like when I was saying earlier, you want to find things that your music's going to work well in. Then you need to know how to target those opportunities. Like, how do I even figure out that? Well, there's a system I have that is really easy that actually shows you exactly what the best opportunities are. And then circling back to what you were asking about is how to pitch and, interact with the supervisors. But in the end, it comes down to your music. That's the most important part. It's the part that the supervisors really care about. Is your as you would expect.
Probably more so than many other places in music. They put a lot of themselves out there when they recommend stuff for a project. Yeah,
exactly.
So I was reading a Hypebot piece that you did covering AI and music licensing, and maybe much has already changed just with the rapid change of everything in AI. But what would you say is the most urgent thing sync-seeking artists need to understand about AI's impact on their income potential right now?
First thing I want everybody to do who's worried about that is take a nice deep breath and relax, because it's not as dour as some people think it is. So the reason that there's not a ton of bad news. So let's start with the worst news. AI is making inroads into the sync industry, but it's all at the bottom. So it's mainly in production libraries, and that's music that gets into like sportscasts and like YouTube videos and things like that. That's all instrumental, easy to replicate, right? AI can replicate sort of production music fairly easily, like, background music for things.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of songs, which music supervisors are mostly interested in, besides composers, right? So there's either composers or there's songwriters. There's one massive barrier for AI right now, and that is copyright. So if you go and use AI to generate music, whether it's lyrics or the melody or anything, you cannot copyright it. So even though the AI platform might say in their terms of use, they might say, hey, you know what? You own everything you do on here. The Copyright Office begs to differ. They're like, no, you don't. It's like, we have not legislated that. It's not been legislated. It may never get legislated. You don't own the copyright for the music that was generated via AI. So therefore, it cannot be used in single licensing. You have to own the copy. Someone's got to own the copyright. So that's the number one thing. Then this very close second is that when it comes down to especially like, higher end movies and shows and that have, loyal audiences and things, not sort of just entertainment, but like, people get into a show and stuff. They don't want to feel like there's some computer singing at them, you know? They want to feel like there's a person, right? It's like airbrush models on billboards, you know? It's like, it's like, wow, it's supposed to be the epitome of beauty, I guess, and I guess it is, but I just don't connect with it. It's like, and it's that thing that the audience is very cautious about. And the supervisors are thus the same way. They never want to be accused of slipping in a fake song, quote unquote. So there's a whole culture that's against AI music in a lot of applications. So that's really the two big things that contain the human element, and so human music is absolutely prioritized. It's legal, and it's been going gangbusters. I mean, we've gotten more sync placements in the last couple of months, the last beginning of 2026, than at any other similar period since we started Sync Songwriter. So we're years into AI already, right? We're like 3 years probably of operational AI that can actually make some semblance of decent sound, and it keeps increasing, right? So in terms of human sync placement, so there's nothing to worry about. Now, there could be at some point, but and by the way, you can use AI to assist you. You can use AI to do demos. You can use AI to, help you out, but you have to have written the melody and you have to have written the lyrics.
You sort of reinforced impression I've always had, and that is that creators, some of them anyway, seem more enamored with AI than audiences do.
Yeah, exactly. Very true.
Okay, last question for you, I think. unless you make me think of another one. If a musician has never pursued sync licensing before, what's the single first step they should take this week?
Oh, yeah. Very okay. I got a bunch of answers, but you qualified that this week. Well, the very first thing that I would do is, I'll make this I'll give you a couple answers, okay? Just because I could just say, make sure you got good music and you got the right tracks, and you're ready to go, right? So that you've got actual product, quote unquote. But that just literally means something to give to the supervisors, right? Your widgets, which are your tracks and your songs,
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you've got your ducks in a row and you've got your music ready to rock and you're prepared, and you've already reached that stage, right? You're not just learning to write music. You're not learning how to produce. You got things half done. You don't want to be starting to get into sync with things half finished. You want to have finished masters done, because those are the things that actually get into TV and film. The big answer, though, would be the most proactive one, is you need to figure out before you start doing other things how you're going to connect with the right people in TV and film. You need a roadmap. So you need to figure out, like, how am I actually going to connect with them? I got my music ready and I could do all these other things. I could get into a library. I could try to get a sync agent. I can try to cold email. I could, send off my music for a fee to who knows who, to judge. Like some people are offering briefs that I can pay for. There's all these avenues that lead to very, very little in my long experience in this industry. And what really does work are the relationships. It's a relationship business. You need to figure out, how am I going to get someone who can do something to hear my music? That's the biggest nut to crack. And that's should be your main focus and main concern. So do your research online. And again, it's relationships, so you just can't look it up and all of that and everything. And I don't jump onto podcasts here to pitch my business. I come on here to inform and whatever. But if you do want to work with me, we only open once a year, and that's in every January. So, but at the very least, you can hop on our mailing list. I put out blogs every week, and you can learn a ton, just like you learned here, about how to do it. And then if you want to work with me later, I'll talk to you next January.
Where do they find you for all that good stuff?
Well, the best thing to do would simply be just go to the website. You can jump on the mailing list there. You can reach out and send me a note. I read every single one that comes through. If it's relevant to me, the team will send it to me. And that would be syncsongwriter.com, syncsongwriter.com. And we'll see you there.
Thank you for spending time with me today. It's great talking with you.
It was really, a pleasure talking to you too. And I got to say, I've done a bunch of podcasts, and this is certainly top tier. Like you have really smart questions. It sounds like you're coming up with them on the fly, and they're really relevant and very smart. And so really appreciated you as an interviewer.
That's a relief, man. I feel stiff a lot when I listen to the recordings over and all these. I've almost done 350 episodes just for this podcast, and I'm like, God damn, when am I going to, remember to stay a certain distance from the microphone or what?
Hey, we're all learning, man. We're all learning.
As an independent podcaster, your support means the world to me. You could even say I depend on it. With that in mind, here are some things you can do to help support us. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Or shoot me a review by email, robonzo@unstarvingmusician.com, that I can use on the website. Or just share this episode with a friend. This makes a huge impact on our audience growth. You could also visit our crowd sponsor page at unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn of the many other ways of supporting the podcast, including a quick and easy online tip jar. It's like click, tip, done, easy, and super appreciated. The music you're hearing is New Gods Part 2, the instrumental mix by yours truly. You can hear the full version, download it, or buy it at robonzo.com. And if all this was too much to remember or process, just go to the show notes for this episode at unstarvingmusician.com to find links to all the stuff talked about in this episode. You can leave us feedback, questions, comments, complaints at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. Thanks for listening. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.